Welcome back to Secret Weapons. My name is Mark Johnson. If this is your first time here, this is a YouTube channel where we do gear demos and reviews, as well as studio tips and tricks for leveling up your writing, your playing, and your production from the perspective of a guitar player working out of a studio. If that's the kind of thing that would appeal to you, please hit that subscribe button and stick around for future videos. Today we're taking a look at the Soyuz 1973 condenser microphone, as well as the Soyuz Lakeside preamp. And no, I did not consider the fact that I was wearing this shirt on the way into the studio today. So right at the outset, I want to let you know that we're going to be doing things a little bit differently in this video than we normally do on the channel. Rather than doing a bunch of exhaustive sound samples at the end of the video, we're going to be kind of sprinkling them in throughout. So chapter markers down below if you want to jump to a specific thing. On top of that, we are also going to be pulling our sound samples from that intro song. We're just going to kind of pull out individual sources and stems, isolate them, and listen to them unmixed and unprocessed. So let's start by talking about the 1973. This is a large diaphragm FET condenser microphone that was dropped off to me by the Soyuz team back in March of this year. And I want to be very clear about the fact that yes, Soyuz did give me this microphone. No, they did not ask for a video. They are not paying for a video. And I did not reach out to them about making a video. This video is simply a byproduct of the fact that I had some time available in my calendar and I really wanted to make a video on something that I have been using a lot. And so in the spirit of that, we're going to keep this pretty casual. So 1973 is Soyuz's budget offering in terms of their large diaphragm condenser microphones. This uses the exact same capsule as you would find in their O23 bomblet, which is a transformer balanced FET microphone that comes in at about $1,700. And by comparison, this is their budget offering down at about $899 at time of publishing. Worth noting that as little as like 2 months ago or 3 months ago or so, this was $100 cheaper, but it is current year and prices are not great. So there's a conversation I want to have about the positioning of this mic as a budget offering, but we'll circle back around to that. Like I said, the 1973 is a transformerless FET microphone with a cardioid polar pattern and a frequency response range from 30 Hertz to 18 kilohertz. On the bottom, you have an adjustable switch for applying a pad at 0, -10, or -20 dB. And this thing can handle quite a bit of SPL. I think it's rated at about 140 decibels. In my experience, it's a pretty sensitive microphone, not overly so, but like in my room right now, which is moderately well treated, it does a good job of feeling intimate and close. It's sensitive in all the right ways for detail and articulation, and the cardioid polar pattern does give you a pretty good sense of off-axis and rear-axis rejection. For example, we are talking kind of directly at camera with it just to the side of my mouth right now. This is what it sounds like if we are talking directly into it at about 6 inches away. Here we are talking about 6 inches away, directly 90 degrees off axis from the microphone, and spinning the microphone 180 degrees, talking directly into the rear of the microphone. The microphone does not come with a shock mount, but instead this simple little microphone arm that it kind of like slots onto and threads from the bottom. It is not a shock mount. I will link below to an incredibly cheap shock mount you can buy that fits this microphone, but this one itself is not going to reject anything, as you can hear. Is this what ASMR is? The 1973 is an interesting microphone in the Soyuz lineup. They're a company that kind of prides themselves on their exacting build qualities and kind of a desire to do things the old way, hearkening to a bygone era of mic production. All of their stuff is handmade in their factory in Russia, where they use things like hand lathes to build their microphones, and they hand sputter their capsules. And the result are really beautiful microphones of very high build quality, but also a frequency response range that can be charitably called warm or uncharitably called kind of dark. I don't actually think that calling them dark in a pejorative way is a fair assessment of the higher end Soyuz microphones. The O17 and the O23 bomblet, in my opinion, are great sounding microphones, very warm and musical, but by comparison, the 1973 is relatively bright and airy. Now, mind you, it's not going to touch something like a modern AKG 414 that tends to be almost boosted in the air bands, despite the fact that the 1973 uses the same capsule as the O23 bomblet. If you pull up comparative frequency response charts of the two microphones, you'll see that they have very different high, mid, and high-end response patterns. For example, you have a pretty smooth chart for the O23 that even has mild cuts in about the 3K and 8K ranges, and by comparison, the 1973 actually boosts in both of those areas, including a pretty precipitous uptick in that 8K kind of airband way. But despite those relatively high boosts comparatively, the microphone doesn't sound either unbalanced or, in my opinion, ever harsh or fizzy, which is especially impressive because of my propensity for using it on electric guitars. And I think that's part of the reason that this has become a daily driver for close miking on guitar cabinets. Its lack of an omnipolar pattern is one of the reasons that I haven't really considered it for room miking electric guitars, but the high SPL, the built-in pads on the bottom, and that kind of really nice balancing of a high mid boost and an 8K kind of airband boost in this microphone make it a really, really great contender for close miking guitar cabinets, especially considering you have, like I said, almost no harshness or fizziness in this microphone. And so let's jump into our first sound sample. All of our guitars on that intro track were tracked with an early 90s Matchless Chieftain, a guitar amplifier that has a ton of great presence and high-end clarity. And what that allowed me to do for part of these guitars was to take that Gibson Les Paul, to roll the volume and the tone back slightly on that bridge pickup, which does a lot to kind of deaden the really high response of that guitar, giving you a slightly woodier, a slightly more mid-forward and muted timbre. And so for those samples, we have the 1973 about 3 inches off the grill cloth, right on the edge of the speaker cone in that Matchless Chieftain. And we're really allowing the openness of that top end in the amplifier itself, as well as that great clarity of the 1973 to allow a not super cutting guitar part like that Gibson Les Paul to still have a lot of presence in a mix. This is an interesting mic to have the budget conversation about, because on one side, this is still a $900 microphone, $899 at time of publishing. And if you are somebody who is in the market for exclusively a budget condenser microphone, there are a lot of mics out there that come much cheaper. But it's worth noting that they come much cheaper in a lot of ways. There are great sounding budget mics out there, and I begrudge nobody a great sounding $300 to $400 condenser microphone. They are also often much cheaper in their build qualities and the potential longevity of a mic like that. The 1973's assembly and build quality and design feels head and shoulders above a lot of the more budget-friendly microphones I have, even if I would just consider the sound quality of them all to be more different than better or worse. Although I will say, for things like acoustic guitars and electric guitar amp cabinets, this outpaces basically any budget condenser mic I've ever used, just in my personal experience. But conversely, when you throw around terms like affordable or budget offering for a high-end audio company, whether it is Neumann or Soyuz or anything in that kind of ilk, connotations get ascribed to that I don't think are necessarily accurate to this microphone either. It is the most affordable Soyuz large diaphragm condenser microphone, but it doesn't feel budget to me. Like I said, the build quality, the all metal housing, the design, everything feel exacting and high end and well made. And it is still a handmade microphone in the same factory as the rest of the Soyuz lineup, featuring the same hand sputtered capsule that you'll find in a microphone almost twice the price. And so rather than building a worse microphone, it feels like Soyuz just found ways to drive costs down. Obviously, the structure, the design, the shape, and the build of the 73 is a lot more simple and almost utilitarian looking than their more ornate and beautiful offerings. Additionally, a lot of their mics come in very nice wood cases, like carrying cases. This microphone comes in a cardboard box. It comes in a, to be fair, nice cardboard box, but it's still a cardboard box by comparison. And we discussed the fact that it doesn't come with a shock mount, but instead this very simple one-axis microphone holder. And finally, and I think this might be one of the most significant ways in which they were able to drive down the price on the 73, is this is a transformerless microphone versus something like the transformer balanced 023 bomblet. And this is where the idea of affordability and budget as a pejorative or a connotation kind of starts to irk me a bit. And that's because transformer balanced or not transformer balanced microphones are not better or worse. Much like choosing between a FET mic or a tube mic, they're just a difference in preference more often than not. A FET microphone might be more preferable to somebody over a tube mic if they really want to preserve the transient attack of their source. Meanwhile, you might want a tube mic if you want that warmth of a tube, as well as that smoother response and attack of a tube microphone. And so it goes with FETs and tubes. It can go with transformerless and transformer microphones. A transformer is going to add color and saturation to sources, as well as often kind of changing the character and perceived density of the low end and low mid frequency ranges in a microphone. Whereas a transformerless microphone might actually read as clearer or more transparent for the original source, and that might be preferable to you. And so with those factors in mind, there might be very legitimate reasons why you would even choose a 1973 over something like the bomblet, purely if you want the slightly brighter response range and that less saturated transformerless circuit. And so the 1973 really cuts an interesting balance between those two ideas. It's expensive for a budget microphone, but it's also really nice for a budget microphone. And so let's jump into our next sound sample. We're going to listen to that kind of lead tele guitar part. And that's because where we really leaned into the warmth of that Gibson Les Paul, we are now going to lean into the clarity of this microphone, that kind of high air band, all of that bright reverb-laden angelic tone of a tele neck pickup position playing way too much reverb. It's a great sound. And because we're running into a great amplifier using this transformerless microphone, we're going to get smoothness and saturation and richness at the preamp level. For tracking these electric guitars, one of the things I did was rolled back and attenuated the output of the Lakeside preamp, allowing me to lean harder into the input gain, hitting the kind of transformers in the preamp itself a lot harder, which gives us just a little bit of character and vintage class and quality and smoothness and richness. I know, buzzwords, I apologize. In the future, we're going to do a video really taking a more focused look at that Lakeside preamp because I think it's worth it. Every single source you hear in this video, the acoustic guitars, the bass, the electrics, and even my voice right now are all running through that Lakeside preamp. And in this next sound sample, you can really hear the kind of clarity of this microphone and the quality of that preamp. Let's give it a listen. The only piece of this video Soyuz has any real sense of what's going on with is going to be this part right here. As I was tracking the acoustic guitar parts for the song at the start of this video, I found that I was getting like a weirdly high noise floor and not a lot of volume out of the 1973. I compared it against a couple other microphones I have and found that, yeah, I was in fact not getting the right signal from this mic that I know it for. And so I actually pulled a couple of the screws out of the bottom of this thing, disassembled the microphone, and did find that I had a broken solder joint on one of the leads going to the capsule. I shot Soyuz a DM on Instagram about it, and in the very short time it took for them to write back, I had basically already grabbed a solder gun and fixed it myself. The whole process of disassembly, repair, and reassembly took probably less than 10 to 15 minutes in summation, but I tell you that both in the interest of full transparency, as well as the fact that my fix was easily identifiable and easily repairable, and I did not have to use Soyuz's customer service. So I can't speak to that side of it, though I have heard good things, but I was able to fix this very easily myself. I don't advocate you do that, and your mileage may vary. Maybe there's something about the warranty. If you do that, I don't know. Contact Soyuz if you have any issues. I was still tracking my acoustics and feeling pretty good about them. And then when I repaired the mic, I had to go back and retrack everything because this mic really does excel on acoustic instruments. We're recording with a double-aught style Martin acoustic guitar. We've got the pad disengaged on the microphone, giving us kind of full volume from this. Again, leaning very hard into the color and saturation on that Lakeside preamp, probably 6 inches off of the guitar itself, pointed right at that neck and body joint. And yeah, let's just hear this thing on acoustic instruments because it sounds really good. I love that low end response. I love the kind of clarity. I'm not somebody who likes that kind of classic direct in Taylor sound. I want my acoustics to sound woodier and with a little bit more mid-range focus, but while still having clarity. And this mic represents that kind of classic Martin sound really accurately. And that cardioid pickup pattern paired with the relative sensitivity of that mic means that for those samples, you still feel like that intimate focus of the acoustic guitar, but there's not so much rejection that it sounds like a DI guitar input. You're still getting the context that you're recording in, at least in this, a fairly treated room. And so for our last sound samples in this video, we're going to pivot away from the 1973, and we're going to listen to my bass recorded directly into the Soyuz Lakeside preamp. Here in the studio, I basically moved almost everything I do guitar-wise to being microphones first. Miking up acoustic guitars were available, miking up guitar cabinets rather than running direct anymore. But the one thing I'm still running direct is electric bass through the Origin Bass Rig Super Vintage, an all analog SVT style amp in a box solution with an XLR output. So we are running that into the Lakeside, and once again dialing back on the output of that pedal board just enough that we can really lean into hitting that saturation and transformer color in the Lakeside. I have run this bass rig directly into my Apollo preamps. I've run it into Warm Gear. I've run it into the Maris API style preamps, and for my money, this is the widest, roundest, largest, and most musical preamp, especially for bass, but for all my sources, but especially for bass, I have come across, and I am very much smitten with that. So let's give that a listen. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching. Do you want to see more content like this? Are videos on mics something that appeal to you at all? And more specifically, do you want to see the follow-up kind of deep dive into the Soyuz Lakeside? I'm inclined to do it anyways because ultimately this is just my channel, but if you do want to see something on the Soyuz Lakeside, please leave a comment down below, like the video, and let me know what sources you want to hear in a video like that. Once again, thank you for watching. Please subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.